With that, we're going to step into our first session, which is an analytics journey from data to dashboard. And we've got one of our clients, Morgan Wheeler, with Farmers and Merchants Bank, who's going to walk us through basically what his journey looked like. He saw some challenges that were uniquely able to be supported by a combination of a couple of the tools that we're going to be talking about over the next 2 days. He's going to be joined by our very own Craig Colangelo, and I'm going to leave it to you guys to go into this Q&A session. So take it away, guys.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Craig Colangelo. I'm a senior solutions architect at PMsquare. Joining me this morning is Morgan Wheeler, as Dustin said. Morgan is an assistant vice president and the business intelligence manager at Farmers and Merchants Bank in Southern California. Morgan, would you please tell us a little bit about Farmers and Merchants Bank and what your role there entails?
Sure. Well, good morning to everyone. Thank you for having us, to the PMsquare crew and the sponsors. We are an advocate of PMsquare and the solutions that and partnerships that they bring to the table, and we're glad to be on this journey with you. We are a traditional old bank trying to do a bunch of new stuff real quick. As of about a year ago, we were a $7.3 billion bank. We service the 3 counties of Southern California, as well as Santa Barbara in Central California. So last year we had about $7.3 billion in assets under management, and then mostly loans and deposits. And then over the last 95 days, we added the same amount of assets that we added over our first 95 years. So $2.2 billion worth of assets over basically the first and most of the second and a little of the first quarter of this year. So doubled, and really doubled our deposit size overnight. We have, like I said, we cover the Los Angeles, Orange County, Santa Barbara, and San Diego County area, and I oversee our business intelligence department. So again, hi, my name is Morgan. We've been on an analytics journey now for about 2 years with PMsquare, using Cognos and a network of other solutions to achieve our goals for analytics and insight and data warehousing. My team oversees that strategy directly for our CIO. I've got an army of 4, and Craig, who's a valuable member of that team. And we are in charge of implementing the business intelligence strategy, which is a brand new tech experiment at our bank.
Gotcha. Old bank, new tech. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thanks, Morgan. So today we're going to have a conversation about a recent analytics journey that Morgan marshaled, which was pretty unique, very situational, and presented plenty of opportunity for farmers and merchants to capitalize on Congress's funding of the $2.2 trillion CARES Act for the benefit of its community, its customers, and for the bank itself. So we're going to discuss the analytics journey that F&M took to enable lending via the Paycheck Protection Program, or the PPP, and how they benefited from the data that they collected along the way. But before we get into that analytics journey, though, I'd like to add some context by offering a small business owner's perspective. So me as the borrower in this PPP lending relationship. So in addition to being a part of the PMsquare team, I also own a completely unrelated small business that's run day-to-day by my team of managers. Soccer Buddies is a youth soccer instructional program. We target younger, less hardcore soccer kids looking to, just have fun, build self-esteem, be healthy. We primarily teach through like imaginative play and offer weekly classes, in person primarily, indoor and outdoor classes at a bunch of different locations across 3 states. So to a small business owner like me who had to immediately cease operations due to the COVID pandemic for some unknown period of time, this first round of the $345 billion PPP seemed like it could be a real lifeline. Details were really unclear and ever changing, but the PPP appeared to give Soccer Buddies the ability to retain our key employees, providing some stability for our staff during these, suddenly unstable times. Not to mention also helping to keep our customers and community safe by not operating, but still staying afloat. The way that the PPP was actually rolled out from Congress and the Treasury was, pretty haphazardly, probably due to the scope of such a huge, unprecedented program and the immediate needs to curb the COVID infection rates. So Soccer Buddies, we knew that we had to scramble because we kept hearing these stories of big corporations quickly eating up the budgeted funds from Congress. To further complicate things, our big bank of 9 years didn't help at all because we didn't happen to have a business credit card from them. So what we did was we put aside our relationship with our big bank and looked to a local regional bank to help. So now that we have a little context around what exactly the PPP offered to desperate small businesses like mine, let's dive into the lender's perspective. So on the other side of this equation were the banks themselves who were scrambling to implement the means of collecting applications from existing customers and even non-customers. Some were even just figuring out how to just become SBA lenders, and all were having to navigate the ever-changing guidelines. Then, of course, banks had to set out to approve and quickly release the much-needed funds to oftentimes desperate businesses. So all of this presented a very tricky situation for banks in order to implement PPP lending. So Morgan, would you give us a little background on what this looked like from a regional bank's perspective? What sort of work was required to quickly stand up the infrastructure required to even participate in this opportunity?
Yeah, it was. I think back on it, it still kind of makes me a little nervous because it was chaotic to put it lightly. In addition to all of the lack of guidance that was coming out of the SBA, which in and of itself is a very, very interesting source for these types of loans. And we've heard them say they've done more business in the first 2 quarters of this year than they have in the last 20 years, something like that. So they were also not ready for this. And the reality is that we had to accommodate a loan application process that was already underway. The SBA had said that this was out there, that these funds would be available. So anybody who had a relationship with a bank was knocking on doors, sending emails, calling, as they should. But banks enjoy a particular position in society to do exactly this for a community. And we had to figure out a way to wrestle this all into one place. And we had to not only create an application process essentially overnight. My team created that from about 7 p.m. to about 3 a.m. the next day, an actual application and processing process in which we issued just shy of $800 million in loans, a lot of which had no codification or capability to actually be booked in our core system. So if you think about this, the emergency nature of this required loans to be funded before they could be sufficiently booked in our system does not eliminate the compliance and underwriting requirements for a loan. So we had to come up with something. We had no option but to come up with something quick, a process. Once you have a process, once you have something that an army of people can then do, get on the phone, start collecting information, you have to be able to tell people where they are in that process and how many applications you have and what is in what stage. And that was a data module in Cognos. Overnight, we were able to put together not only our internal staff's ability to understand how many applications we had and where they were coming from and who was a client and who was not, but also turn that around to give our clients, just like the position you were in, some peace of mind as to when they might expect their money. And a lot of this were people we knew, and we knew that money was going to pay their paychecks, which means our personal associates' ability to make rent that month. So it was not only an emergency, but it was very personal.
That's interesting. Yeah, it sounds like a whole lot of work. What sort of opportunities specifically did this present for farmers and merchants?
Well, like I said, the conversation just at the opening of this year was, how do we make it to $10 billion? What types of investments in technology, what kinds of analytics, what kind of new services, what kind of, constant enhancement to the banking relationship that our clients need, et cetera. Excuse me, not COVID. So improvements to mobile banking and online banking, things like that, that your banker's in your pocket now. And that's one of the things we're up against. And so what was interesting is that while we laid out a strategic plan over the next 3 years to do what we did in the first, or essentially in the second 3 months of this year. So boom, there, we're a $10 billion bank all of a sudden. And not just with forgivable loans either. People brought their money to F&M because they sensed economic stress coming. Same thing happened to us in 2008. So the opportunity for us, and this is exactly where Cognos comes in, for instance, is identifying those new clients, identifying those expanded relationships, and making sure that we cater to them, keep them, of course, and grow them. And that's quite an opportunity, and one we expected to have in 3 years from now, and all of a sudden we have right now.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I heard you mention data modules. How exactly did you expose this data to decision makers at farmers and merchants?
So that's probably the biggest challenge for me is we've got, you know, I think we have a hobby of collecting every type of data source that an enterprise possibly can. You know, I mean, tab delimited flat files with no file extension, you know, UPSIDIC, if there's anybody who remembers that, DB2, I mean, and we have, and our core systems on DB2, so we have to put this all together somehow, and we're striving toward a centralized data warehouse and thoroughly looking at Incorda, and they're definitely our front runner right now, because every time we have a big project like this, we have to hatchet everything together. And thus far, in the absence of a centralized unified data platform, which is on our technology roadmap, you've got to put this stuff together. You've got to report to execs. And so for us, that's a lot of SQL, a lot of ETL, and then a real big Cognos data module so that we can corral all this data into the presentation layer that our users already know, which is of course Cognos, and attach it to the account numbers they're already used to seeing. And that was all done with a data module. That was day 2 after we made the process on day 1.
That's amazing. That's pretty agile. So, you know, looking back in retrospect, and even with the ongoing work that I know is going on now, you know, from a regional bank's perspective, was your rollout of the PPP lending and the corresponding analytics journey that you marshaled here, would you consider that a success?
Absolutely, because it proved to the organization that we have to do more of this, that this really is, data is the new oil, and that it's also the means by which we can do the intimate relationship banking that we're notorious for at any kind of grand scale. And how that plays out and, you know, what money gets spent where is still an executive debate. But I think the PPP and Cognos's place within it proved exactly why we have a BI department, which is the manager of the BI department was a great thing.
Gotcha. Yeah. Did this particular analytics journey expose any weak spots for you in your existing data and analytics means and methods? Because I know that gave you a real advantage having something solid in place going into this whole thing. Did you see any weak spots that you plan to address?
Yeah, we need a data warehouse. You know, I would have been even quicker to market with this if I had some place where everything goes, and we still aren't quite there yet. We've evolved organically with everything, including our data, so it's everywhere. But that's no excuse. If we've got it, I got to get to it. And so that's it revealed the more of what we know about a strategic advantage to having a unified data platform, which we're not quite there yet. And that's you know, my major initiative now, and PPP just shined a big light on that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think this exemplifies a lot of the situation that a lot of our customers in. So Morgan, I appreciate the frank conversation and the opportunity to get to know farmers and merchants a little bit better. You know, I think our quick conversation about your PPP lending analytics journey has reinforced a few things for me in particular. One, the need for quick time to market solutions for particularly hot opportunities like this PPP lending experience. 2, the value of having solid existing analytics means and methods already in place. And 3, that even for straightforward operational data, which a lot of this kind of started with, the application data, the core data, all these things combined kind of, you know, are pretty straightforward operational data. But even with that operational data, enrichment is necessary to take it from a spot solution all the way from, you know, data to true insight. So thanks again, Morgan, for making time today to share your journey with us.
Sure. Thank you, Greg. I mean, you were a critical part of that role, and what can't be, you know, overstated is your partnership's role in this. If not just providing you a couch to lie on and some psychology sessions while you battle through these data challenges, being able to bounce things off of a partner like you cuts our timelines in half for delivery. So thank you for being a part of that.
Thank you, Morgan. We appreciate the opportunity. Dustin?
Yeah, thank you guys. Morgan, I really appreciate all the kind words, and as always, love hearing about the successes there. So thank you, and thank you, Craig, for leading us through that Q&A. Up next is going to be our keynote. I'm really excited to welcome Adam Wilson, who is the CEO of Trifacta. Adam has over 24 years of experience with IT, very deeply rooted in data, and I'm really excited to hear what Adam's going to be sharing with us today. So Adam, welcome, and thank you again for the partnership, the sponsorship today, and excited to hear what you have to share. Adam, it looks like we've still got you muted, or maybe you're muted.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. And let's see here. I want to start sharing a screen, so give me 1 second here. All right.
Well, while you're queuing that up, how do we get one of those shirts?
Yeah, I know. Well, that's this is a Trifacta partner and customer exclusive. So.
All right.
All right. Let's see here. Let me know if you can.
Yep, looks good. It's coming through.
Are you seeing my screen okay?
Yes.
Are you seeing the, looks like you're seeing screen 2, main screen. Let me try that. All right, I think we're in business. Okay, got lots of screens going here today. So thanks everybody for spending some time with us. We're excited to be part of this event, and certainly want to say a big thank you for including Trifacta in some of these discussions. We're excited about the agenda over the next couple of days. I wanted to maybe step back and just set a little bit of broad context in terms of really what's going on right now as people start talking about analytics modernization and some of the changes and disruptions that we're seeing in the market that really are generational shifts that have occurred, the likes of which many of us who've been in this space for a long time haven't seen, for over a decade. And it's a really exciting time to be focused on data. It's a really exciting time to be working on a lot of the projects that I know many of you are working on as companies have woken up to the fact that they compete on information as much as the goods and services that they create or provide. And I think what's interesting is that you jump into a lot of these discussions, and the first thing that everybody wants to talk about, ends up being, focused on AI and ML. And so I figured I would get the obligatory AI and ML slide out right up front today, but I'm not here to talk to you about the hype around AI. What I want to do is really talk about the realities of what we're seeing on the ground as we work with customers and partners like PMsquare. And what's interesting is that as much as there's so much attention on AI, the reality is that everybody's got access to the same algorithms. A lot of this stuff has been taught in educational curriculum now for well over a decade. Many of the open source technologies are giving these algorithms away for free. The cloud providers are providing suites to grab onto this technology as well. And so the algorithmic pieces and approaches are very much broadly available. In addition to that, gone are the days when only the big sophisticated companies could do the big sophisticated things. Now with the click of a button, anybody can spin up an incredibly complex environment to do processing and data manipulation at scale. And so really what's happened is that the frontier for competition has shifted. And what you're finding now is that people are competing increasingly on the data products that they create, which is creating urgency around trying to figure out a way to democratize that process. Are there ways that you can stitch data together in new and unique ways that are increasingly coming from diverse data sources so that you can gain competitive advantage? So whether that's open data, government data, dark data, third-party data that you're buying, data marketplaces that are spinning up everywhere, this has become the area where you're seeing the most innovation. And it's less about just democratizing the consumption or the visualization of the data. It's really about how can I get smart about piecing things together in a way in which the production of the data assets now can be done by an increasingly broad set of users who aren't necessarily all structured programmers. So can we harness the context that exists in people's heads to help them see for themselves and help themselves, so that now they can do in clicks what used to take months, where they would have to sit back and wait for others to provision these cuts of data for them on their behalf. And so unfortunately, though, what we're finding is that as much as that's the vision and that's where a lot of the exciting action is, right now, more losers than winners. And really forget all the data that's born outside your firewall. This is about even just harnessing the data that you currently have directly under management. And so we find that this is further exacerbated by the fact that as much as everybody wants to talk about AI and ML, if your data quality is bad, your machine learning is probably worthless. And God forbid you start automating bad decisions faster based on bad data. So you really have to think very carefully about the underlying data platform and the underlying approach that you're taking to creating, structuring, cleansing, and transforming your data as part of really jumping into leveraging data, leveraging AI, and leveraging ML. And I think this is something that often gets overlooked as everyone rushes to try to implement some of these approaches. And this is indicative of really a broader market shift that we're seeing. And so when I talked about that generational change, there is a moment in time where any one of these changes that are illustrated here on their own, would be potentially disruptive. But the fact that these secular megatrends are all colliding or happening at the exact same moment in time, creates this really interesting opportunity for companies to step back and really reconsider, how they're approaching data, how they're managing data, how they're thinking through analytics and the production of data products. And so I think that you haven't kind of seen this kind of explosion and this kind of change in a very long time. And I think that this calls into question new process, new approach, new tool chain, new platforms, and really is the basis of a lot of the data modernization and the focus on increased agility that you're seeing out there in the market. I think for Trifacta, we've been very focused on trying to participate and enable that change by going after what we affectionately think of as the janitorial work with the data. So we are very proudly data janitors, and we are focused on this 80% problem, which is like, how do you get raw data and refine it to a point that it actually is useful for downstream consumption? And so in a sense, the observation that came out of the original research that birthed Trifacta, and this dates back to the origins of the company coming out of Cal Berkeley and Stanford, was this observation that like, hey, a lot of the time, the cost and the pain in any analytic project is in getting the data into a shape that it's useful, because you're seeing this Cambrian explosion of data types and data diversity that everyone's having to contend with on the left-hand side of this picture. And at the same time, you have an increasingly diverse set of tools that people are trying to consume that data with. But in the end, where people are spending their time is actually, again, trying to get to a point where they can understand the shape and the quality, the consistency, the conformity of the data, and ultimately making it useful. Because once you get to nice, clean, organized rows and columns, then a lot of the algorithmic stuff and a lot of the dashboarding and everything that you want to do, flows pretty quickly. But the research that Trifacta actually created, that was the genesis of the company, just indicated that far too many projects are stalled, far too many projects are running kind of over time and over budget because the data itself is so challenging to contend with. And often is changing in a way that will, break a lot of the downstream pipelines that you're trying to create, which now has, very broad, business implications. So the original hypothesis, for Trifacta was, why is this still so hard? Why is it that, given all the technology that's out there, that this is still where people are saying they're getting stuck? And the thesis was that, maybe it would be possible to allow the people who know the data best to do this work, the people who have the context in their heads to get more directly involved in doing this on their own. And even though those individuals, may not, again, be structured programmers, this shouldn't be the exclusive purview of the highly technical. We want to get to a point where we could turn this into a user experience problem that's powered by machine learning, where we can learn from the data, because guess what? Every data set's not a new data set. Odds are somebody has seen something like it before. And we can actually learn from how the user interacts with the data in order to provide intelligent recommendations and suggestions that will speed up the process for getting the data fit for purpose. And so really, that was the beginnings of the self-service data preparation market, which Trifacta pioneered. And was the mission for the company in the beginning, is really trying to allow the people who know the data best to do this work, to take the data from raw to refined, and to do it in a manner that was both very interactive and very collaborative. And so, if you think about then, what that meant, from the beginning, the idea was to go to the data analyst and to say, hey, we again want to help you get out of the game of writing specifications, throwing it over the wall, and then waiting months and months and months for a data warehouse to get generated or for a table to be added. We'd love for you to be able to, in clicks, create what is essentially a live interactive specification that could actually generate the integration logic itself and allow you to go much faster in getting to those data products that you're trying to create. And it was a very interesting, process, because when the Stanford Data Wrangler prototype was released, targeting this community, within 3 months they had 50,000 people using it. So there clearly was pent-up demand and hunger for, how can I do more of this, interactively, and how can I do more of this visually and on my own, to really speed up the process. Because unfortunately, in most organizations, what you're seeing is an impedance mismatch. You have, hundreds, if not thousands, of data analysts who are being told, and have been told now for years, that they need to be more data driven. But then those users look back and say, well, guys, I can't be more data driven if you don't give me the data in a form that I can actually use it. So help me with that. And because there are so many more of those end users and consumers than there are people who are technically proficient at provisioning the data, you end up with these really long, iterative processes where people write specs, they hand it to a central group who adds it to a long queue of things that they're working on, and then some number of months later they generate the data warehouse. Then the user gets back involved and looks at the data and goes, now that I see the data, that's not really what I wanted. Or now that I see the data, my questions have actually changed, and the whole thing starts all over again. And so how can we get away from that process so that, as you're interacting with the data, as you're shaping, structuring, cleansing the data, you're seeing immediately the impact, of the cleansing and the transformation, the blending of the data, at seeing those data products come together right in front of your eyes. And so as we jumped in and started working with these data analysts, what became very interesting is that the data scientists then raised their hand and said, hey, there's so precious few of us in this organization. I'd rather be spending my time on the algorithmic stuff than all of, writing all this regex and doing all this complex coding in order to just get the data into a decent shape. So maybe I should use this too. And then once we had those two audiences, that's when the data engineers said, well, wait a minute, I'm responsible for data operations. I need to make sure that these things can be governed and can be operationalized at scale. And as part of that, I put the scaffolding in place to support these communities of users. And now this gives me an opportunity to do that in a more collaborative way that involves them. And the nice part is it actually allows me to hand over some of the work to the users who are going to thank me for giving them the work, which is great. because then that frees me up to do other things and to have more strategic impact in thinking about new data sets that could be brought in to the data warehouse or the data lake that could be exposed to the end users that would allow them to, again, now create new data products using that information. And so it becomes this very virtuous cycle of collaborative curation of the data that starts to happen between these three audiences. And so really kind of exciting changes to, I talked about process and I talked about, the people and the roles, but I think that, what's interesting is that if you think about what's going on right now, it reminds me a lot of the trends that I saw, 10, 15 years ago, where you were starting to see people focused on digitization and analytics modernization back then. And what they meant when they talked about digital transformation is they were talking about transaction processing. And so you saw the rise of the relational database. This is back in the days of e-commerce. And then people said, well, gee, now that we've got things digitized and we've got it in the data warehouse, that's great, but man, it's hard to get at that stuff and to visualize it. And so then you saw the rise of the business intelligence market. And then people finally could get eyes on the data and they realized, man, the data is still in really bad shape. The quality is terrible. And then you saw the rise of the data integration and data cleansing market. And so wind that tape forward, 20 years. And what are you seeing now? You're seeing a whole new generation of storage, processing, and database technologies come to the fore to handle the explosion of data diversity and scale. You're seeing a whole new set of data science, BI, and analytic technologies now that are built from the ground up to optimize for those new architectures. And we think that the third leg of that stool is a completely new approach to data transformation, data cleansing, structuring, shaping, blending that data that Trifacta has been championing. So with that, I think the other thing that's important to point out is that the trend around this being a hybrid and multi-cloud world is here to stay. And from our perspective, it's really important that when you think about technology that is your decoder ring for data, that you're doing it in a way that it becomes a decision you make that guarantees your other decisions are changeable. And you never want to be in a position where you can't make late binding decisions about, where to run, where to get at your data and where to do this work. And it's really, really crucial that this is abstracted away from the underlying storage and processing and security frameworks, and that you have the flexibility to change your mind. And so, I think that's the hallmark of a good solution, that is not hardwired to any one set of infrastructure or any one specific approach. I think similarly, it's also the hallmark of making sure that you can provide this to any downstream consumption. We work with a large financial institution in New York that has 126 different BI reporting and analytics solutions that are sanctioned by the bank. And they don't want to wrangle the data, that many times in that many separate tools. They want to prep the data once, and they want to use it across all of those different technologies, in part because they're looking to govern it so they get to single version of truth, but in part because they don't want the redundancy and the rework. At the same time, they've given up the idea that they're going to be able to dictate one standard because there's such an emergence of specialized tools for different types of analysis and visualization. And in many cases, especially some of their data scientists are using 5, 6, 7 different tools, for very specific types of analysis, many of which, notebooks coming out of the data science community, as well as, special, time series tools and algorithmic tools that help them get to the ahas that they need to get to. And so you want to make sure that you have something that really caters to all of those end user environments as much as to the underlying infrastructure that supports the storage and processing. So I thought I'd give you a quick example just to make this a little bit more concrete. So one of our customers is GlaxoSmithKline, and so you can imagine, especially in the age of COVID, how pharmaceutical companies are trying to shrink the time that it takes to go from inception of a new drug to FDA approval. And right now, that generally ends up being about a 10 to 12 year process. And so, that has pretty broad implications. And so as for their business as well as for the health of the population. So as they think about ways to sort of shrink that time so they can get innovative drugs to market faster, a lot of that is around using data in order to get there. And so when you're running clinical trials, one of the things that GSK does is they've got a very large respiratory business. So you can think of this as things like inhalers for asthma. And they started, as part of their clinical trials, putting sensors into the inhalers so that now they actually can get real world evidence. So this is data coming from the inhalers that help them understand, are people using the inhalers 3 times a day? Are they using 3 pumps each time? Are they using the inhalers at 9, noon, and 5 as prescribed or not? Because when they used to do this by surveys, excuse me, what they found is that sometimes people didn't know they weren't using the inhalers correctly, or sometimes they forgot exactly what they did, or they skipped doses that they were supposed to be taking, and that can create challenges in analyzing the clinical trial data. And so now that they have this this real world evidence, it is something that they can give to their scientists. Now, again, when I say scientists, I don't even mean data scientist, I mean chemist who understands what the codes are and can stitch that data together with assay data, experiment data, medical record data, other data types and other information that will allow them to very quickly do the analysis that they need to do to understand the efficacy of the drugs and potential side effects. And so through data, they believe they can take that normal process of 10 to 12 years for most drug discovery and approval, and they can shrink that in half, which is a massive benefit to the organization, from a business perspective, but again, also a massive benefit for the health of the population. And that's all about self-service and empowering the people who understand a lot of the codes and understand the data to get it in there and do that last mile data preparation on their own to create the data products that allow them to do the analysis that they need to do. So anyway, exciting times, for organizations like GSK, but we see this play out in big and small ways in companies all over the globe. Google works with us, and as part of that process, they take us to market as Google Cloud Data Prep. So all the data preparation on Google Cloud, is done with Trifacta technology, and that's across the diversity of use cases that you can imagine. They're bringing on thousands of users each week, onto this platform, and are doing things at scale that the likes of which the world has never seen from a serverless cloud service environment, which has been super exciting to be part of. In addition to that, IBM has standardized on Trifacta as the data preparation solution for Watson and for the Information Sphere family of products. So this is called IBM Advanced Data Preparation, and is now available and in the market, and an area where we've been collaborating with a number of partners, including PMsquare, around some implementations for existing customers. And so we're really excited, to see that the market, has converged on Trifacta as not just the pioneer of the category, but ultimately the market leader in self-service data preparation. And certainly I would be remiss if I didn't say a big thank you, to PMsquare, for their partnership. We're looking forward to working with many of you as we start to roll this out more broadly across the customers and partners that PMsquare is working with. And it's been just a great relationship, and we're certainly very proud of the opportunity together and the work together to date, and looking forward to engaging you in some of these conversations and helping you think about self-service, helping you think about how to implement data wrangling at scale in order to really unlock the potential of your organizations and to unlock the potential of this democratization movement that we're seeing happen, for what was the traditional data integration activities previously. So with that, I think I'm just about at time here, so I will pause if there's any quick questions or comments. Otherwise, I'll hand it to the next speaker. So I just want to say thanks for having me.
Adam, thank you. That was a great presentation. I particularly love what you said at the beginning about how we're kind of coming into a new age of data when people really look at it and they're like, we're going into AI and ML, but that's more a data need than ever. And I recall whenever I first got into doing analytics, one of the phrases was always bad data in, bad data out. I'd imagine that carries over to these other areas as well. It always starts with the data and making sure that you've got good data going into whatever you're going to use it for. So it's a great presentation. We did open up the question panel. If anyone has any questions, you can post those now. And we also are going to have another trifecta session, a little bit more technical right after the break. So if you want to save questions for then that's fine as well. So I think actually we are probably out of time to take questions now, because I think we're supposed to start back here in 8 minutes. So Adam, thank you again. Thank you for the time. Thank you for a great presentation. And we will be back in about 8 minutes. We'll start promptly at 11:30 Eastern. In the next presentation, we'll actually look deeper at trifecta with our very own Randy Dawson, along with some members of the trifecta team.
Great.
So thank you, everyone. If I do see some questions coming in, we'll take those at the end of the next session. So be sure to stick around for the trifecta session.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks again.